Hello and welcome to the Game Theory Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Vicini. We are presented by CLNS Media and The Athletic. Today on the show, we've got good friend of the program, Jared Weiss, in tow to talk about some of what was supposed to be the top teams at the Eastern Conference, but a couple of them have been sliding a little bit, and I thought it was really interesting to kind of delve into these three teams particularly. We're going to talk about the Cavaliers, we're going to talk about the Celtics, and we're going to talk about the Wizards, and then I'm going to ask Jared generally about his NBA thoughts. Jared, before I go to see Thor tonight, I am excited, I am pumped. I just want to know how you're doing. That's really what's important to me in life. How are you?
I'm honestly a little offended that you didn't invite me to Thor. I thought I was a good friend of the podcast, but I guess it doesn't translate to real life.
Well, it's date night, man.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, I figured the barrier was that I live in Boston, you live in LA, but I guess date night would also be one of the barriers to entry for me.
No, definitely just date night. That's the only thing. So we're going to kind of jump into this stuff. Jared, tell the people where you work right now, too, just because I want to hear it from you.
Wait, say that again? You broke up.
Tell the people where you work right now.
Oh, so I used to write for Celtics blog as part of SB Nation, and I was approached by USA Today Sports Media Group to create a new site called Celtics Wire, so CelticsWire.com, not very complicated, and it's almost 99% me writing, talking into cameras, yelling at people on podcasts such as this, so I'll be posting this podcast there as well once it's out, but so that's where I've been doing all my work. I'm still with CLNS Media, appearing on the Garden Report postgame show, which is our Celtics postgame show, which I started 6 years ago, I want to say now. It's been a long time. I was a younger kid back then. Yeah, that's something for sure. But yeah, so you can find all my work there on the CLNS YouTube channel for when you want to see me talk on camera or listen to me talk, and then you can read all my work at Celtics Wire. I am now paying attention to the Facebook page because it turns out people still use Facebook, apparently. So definitely like us on Facebook, and we have a Twitter handle, the Celtics Wire, which is mostly just tweeting out the articles and retweeting my tweets that are not politically charged.
You do know that, Facebook is the largest traffic driver for this stuff, right?
Which is really frustrating because I hate Facebook, and I shut down my Facebook. And I told all my friends, I wrote on my personal Facebook, hey guys, I really hate Facebook because it's just one of my friends liking literally every single thing I post. So I'm going to turn off notifications and not use it ever again. If you want to reach me, either message me or call me in real life. And I opened my Facebook again, the other day, had 1,000 notifications, and almost all of them were my friends commenting saying, good, we hated you anyway. So it worked out really well there.
That was lovely of them. Just beautiful, I would say.
Yeah, somehow getting off Facebook allowed me to close my bubble even more to just people that I agree with. So it worked out pretty nicely.
Let's talk about, who do you want to start with? Do you want to start with your team, or do you want to start with
No. Oh, God, no, please. No, I talked enough about the Celtics.
Okay.
But...
We're going to have to talk about the Celtics eventually, but we're going to talk about
course.
Cleveland first then. Because Cleveland is probably the worst team, not the worst team in the NBA right now. They certainly have the worst defense in the NBA that I've seen. But they're probably the biggest negative surprise in the NBA that I would say. I'm trying to figure out if it's worth panicking about Cleveland just because, hey, LeBron James can turn this on whenever he wants. He's good enough to win games by himself. How much should I be worried about Cleveland? Before we get into the nitty-gritty here of what they're struggling with, how much should I be worried about Cleveland right now? And, is it time for Cleveland fans to be worried?
Well, it sounds like their coach is panicking based on the Friday morning media availability. I think he was out there with Shetty Osman and Ante Zizic doing some warm-up stuff, and he was saying that those two guys know their system the best out of all their players. So the fact that the guys that are now getting minutes because Double T is down for a month, which is also a major issue because he's been healthy his entire career and was the Iron Man. But of course, Iron Man falls eventually in every movie. But I would definitely be concerned about the fact that they have no defensive coherence and their offense isn't making up for it at all. I think you can't have a full-blown Cleveland is going to be a failure panic because Isaiah Thomas isn't back yet / back period. Because they got rid of Kyrie, and right now the offense, they've replaced him with 55-year-old Dwayne Wade and Jay Crowder, who's still figuring out how to integrate into the system. So they haven't really done anything to supplant what Kyrie gave to them, and Kyrie obviously was an elite scorer. So I'm not too concerned about the fact that the offense is a mess, but the fact that they aren't making up for it with playing attentive, good communicative defense is a major issue. I think at the core of it is that LeBron is playing regular season defense right now, which is amazing for 5 plays a game, but otherwise it's kind of a mess. And they have really bad communication issues. Their roster is designed for this to happen. It's all old guys that were good offensive players 5 years ago. They don't really have that many good defenders. Amon Shumpert, he's not really that good right now. They've been trying really hard to trade him. He wants to be out of there. I mean, everything is in place for their defense to fail, and that's exactly what's happening right now.
But you know what the funny thing is about Shumpert right now? So if you look at their on-off defensive ratings, right? All of these numbers are a little bit noisy, especially early on in the year like this. But their overall defensive rating is 111.3, and this is coming into Friday night. So this game that's happening right now, this has not happened yet before these numbers. Amon Shumpert, when he's on the floor, the Cavs have a 95.1 defensive rating. That is considerably better. That is 10 points better than any of the 10 other players that have played at least 100 minutes this year. His athleticism is genuinely helping them defend, even if he is still not super happy to be there.
I mean, yeah, it's I think the point I was trying to make before is that Shumpert is the best defensive player they have probably right now with Crowder. At least Shumpert has continuity with their system, but I don't think he's even that effective right now. He's good enough, but he's always been an inconsistent player. That's the whole reason why he's never been a perennial starter in the NBA, because he's just really inconsistent. And they have these offensive units out there where they have Korver, Wade, and LeBron out there at the same time with Kevin Love, and that team doesn't stand a chance at defending transition, where they are. I think they're the worst transition defense in the defensive team in the league right now. And the pick and roll, they like to show hard on pick and rolls, and they get absolutely murdered by good point guards whenever they do it. And I can't wait to watch the whatever happens in this Washington game to see if Kevin Love is finally able to effectively show hard on a pick and roll. But so far, they're trying to blitz or trap every single pick and roll, and the good point guards are either snaking around them or they're just splitting between Love and whoever's guarding on ball, especially when it's Derrick Rose, which we didn't even mention him yet. But they're getting easy dribble penetration, and their interior guys aren't that good at rotating because they have Jeff Green down there a lot of the time, who makes Jahlil Okafor look like Hakeem Olajuwon on defense. I think it's just simply they don't have any good defensive personnel, or at least not enough to fill out even a 5-man lineup right now.
Yeah, and I do think some of the defense is a little bit noisy right now. Opponents are shooting 41.8% against them from 3.
Which is good.
I don't think that's going to hold. I do think that they have been really particularly bad at getting out on spot-up shooters. They're the worst in the NBA at getting out on spot-up shooters statistically, and I think the eye test kind of matches that. They don't really do a great job of getting out on those guys, and I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that they can't contain penetration, and these point guards and lead ball handlers who are good passers are just kicking out, and they're able to dime guys for open spot-up looks. But I don't think teams are going to shoot 42% against them from 3 this year. Teams are shooting 54% against them from the corners this year. It's just noisy. I think that some of it is luck.
The sample size is just so small that all these numbers are going to eventually regress to the mean. It's like how Boston right now is the number 1 defensive rating in the league, and opponents are shooting 31.2% from 3 against them, which is probably, I assume, is probably the worst in the league. But so that's going to regress back up towards the mean at some point, which is why Boston probably won't finish with the number 1 defensive rating, while Cleveland, I'm not going to say probably want to finish with the worst defensive rating because their track record indicates they might, but and frankly their personnel doesn't really show me anything to think that they're going to really turn this around, especially when Isaiah Thomas comes back. That's not going to really help matters at all. But they're going to start getting more luck. They've had some bad luck so far. They've had a rough schedule so far as well. So all these early like I generally try to wait until like 18 to 23 games into the season before I start to really give stock to some of these overall rating numbers and like shooting percentages.
Yeah, no, and that's kind of what I'm saying. Like I think that we do need to kind of understand that, yeah, the Cavs defense is bad, but I do think that they are getting a little bit unlucky just because no team, like I would be shocked if any team had ever allowed 42% from three. I don't think any team has ever allowed 42% from three. So unless this Cavaliers team is literally a generationally bad defensive team, that's just not going to hold. You know what I mean?
I would definitely not put it against them to do that. But,
and like at the rim, like they're allowing 64% at the rim. I'm sorry, they're not doing that. Hold on. No, they are. Yeah, I was right. They're allowing 63.6%. Again, sorry, I got a little knocked up here looking at the numbers. 63.6% against the rim. That's bad.
You knew you were looking at the right number, but you heard that number out loud, and you're thinking, I must be making a mistake here. Let me double check.
No,
because that number is so unbelievably bad.
It's really not like a disaster. Like I think league average is probably like 61%. So it's not like crazy. Like the Timberwolves are allowing 69% because Karl Anthony Towns can't stop jumping at balls anytime that it's in his vicinity. But like 63.6 is below average and bad. Like they really need to do better at that. They're allowing 38.3% from the mid-range. That's fine. Like they're doing fine. It's just that their defense isn't mobile enough to contain penetration. And once they can't contain penetration, they just are allowing so many spot-up looks that it's becoming an issue.
And so I think the number is bad, even though relative to average it's not that bad. But because they're supposed to be funneling to LeBron or Tristan, those guys should be getting pretty consistent stops at the rim. So I'm definitely very concerned about that. And it's funny that you bring up Minnesota.
Go ahead.
No, I want to know what the key to it all is.
The key to it all is that they're just allowing penetration willy-nilly. Like this team allows more penetration like with greater ease than probably any team in the NBA right now.
Which I'm going to correlate with not good defensive strategy, probably. I want to see them ice pick and rolls consistently instead of continuing to blitz. I mean, that's what they've been doing for the most part for the last couple of years. I think that's what they need to change up because I don't think they have the defensive personnel right now that can make it work.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that it's a strategy problem. I also think it is a personnel problem. Like we just said, like Amon Shumpert and Jay Crowder are their two best defenders. Here are their other perimeter defenders. Derrick Rose, one of the worst perimeter defenders in the NBA. J.R. Smith, very inattentive. He can be pretty solid on the ball whenever he's locked in and whenever he's like, kind of just forced to do that and he gets isolated with one-on-one. Not a very attentive off-ball defender, though, and that can create those spot-up looks. Dwayne Wade, older, not going to be as adept right now at being able to night in, night out defend. Jose Calderon, long been one of the worst defenders in the NBA. Kyle Korver, about 37 years old, not necessarily a super high level defender anymore. He used to get by being smart, but now he's just a little too slow to do that. And again, 37, so he's not going to be able to bring it night in and night out. So, like, you do have Jay Crowder and you do have, Amon Shumpert, who I think is at least an average defender, even if he's, a little bit disengaged. His athleticism and length allows him to be that. And Jay is obviously someone who's really going to care on that end. But there just isn't enough talent here, I don't think, defensively. Like, I do think it's a structural problem.
And you forgot to mention Jeff Green, who I would put in the whoopsie daisies category for defensive acquisitions. So, yeah, it's the entire back end of their rotation is made up of guys that don't defend, which means that when they're having defensive issues with their starting lineup, which already has those defensive issues, they can't bring in guys to stop the bleeding. They actually, I think the guys they would bring in are even worse. And at least Wade is like the one guy that can at least like step in sometimes to play some really good defense, and he at least can affect shots at the rim. He's still really good at that. But when he's on the weak side, it's like JR, who I think JR is one of the worst weak side or help defenders in the NBA. Yeah. Where when he's just kind of trying to play off of someone, he'll see a biddy in the crowd and he's staring at them, and all of a sudden that person's cutting back door, and that happens all the time on them. So,
and, given the fact that like I just kind of went through all those spot up numbers and all those 3-point numbers, I do think it's pretty telling that J.R. Smith has the worst defensive rating on the Cavs.
I'm so shocked to hear that.
But it's just kind of the fact of the matter, though. He is not a very attentive off-ball defender. And, I guess that the question for me is, it goes back to, do you think this is panic time for Cleveland? Is this roster structurally flawed to where they need to make changes, or are we 8 games into the season and we should not worry?
I'm going to stick with my rule of thumb from before, so I would give it another 3 weeks, and then if they're not seeing any progress, then I think that's when you start getting the GM putting Kobe to work and trying to get rid of these older veterans, throw in some second-round picks if you have to, although I don't even remember what their second-round pick stable's looking like right now, but I'd imagine it's pretty depleted. But, the fact is they shouldn't have kept Kyle Korver. That was probably their first mistake because right now he's only providing one thing in a pretty limited capacity.
So you know what, though? They couldn't have signed anyone else, really? They're over the cap. Who did you want them to go get?
I didn't think that far ahead when I made that hot take just now. You don't have to call me out on that.
So here you go. Second round picks.
Which is a fair point. Which is definitely a fair point.
So second round picks. They have sent their 2018 second round pick to Philadelphia or Charlotte, depending on which team finishes worse. Their 2019 second round pick is sent out to one of Orlando, Sacramento, New York, or Detroit. Just one of those deals where there have been multiple trades involving the pick. 2020 second round pick is going to the Clippers. So they don't really have seconds to send out, really. I mean, they could send out 2021 and 2022's pick, but I don't know how much value that's going to get them,
So I have no idea how they're going to get out of this one. At least they have the Nets pick to try to maneuver, which they might want to get rid of quickly because Brooklyn is probably going to be making a run for the playoffs at this rate, even without Jeremy Lin.
I still am skeptical on that, but maybe that does become a less valuable asset, and it's something worth them looking into trading. They do have all of their first round picks into perpetuity now, I believe. Yeah. Or no. They owe 2019 to Atlanta, I believe. But
there we go.
Yeah, they had to move that in the finagling to get Kyle Korver, if I remember correctly. But you can move 2021's first rounder if you want, if you think this is your last chance. But is it worth moving future picks for a team that might be flawed? I think it probably is given the fact that you have LeBron. But I think that's what they're going to have to do. And you mentioned the offense, and I do think it's worth discussing the offense a little bit. This is not an awesome offensive team right now. Entering Friday, they were, I believe, at 104 in terms of offensive rating. I think that the league average is right around 105 or so right now. So they're 16th, 17th, 18th in offensive rating. And for a team that has Kyle Korver, has LeBron James, has all of these, awesome spot-up shooters, has all of these really good creators, Kevin Love as well, that's just not good enough. This defense is never going to be good enough to live up to his 16th overall offensive rating.
Yeah, I just think that just so much of their personnel is just they're past their prime to the point that they're not really creators anymore, and they're pretty much limited to their one area of scope. And I think it's just as simple as that. They just don't have that second go-to player right now. Yeah. And Wade isn't at that level anymore, and they can go to him a little bit, but they're still trying to figure out what kind of actions can we run to actually utilize Dwayne in an effective manner, because giving him a clear out doesn't really work that well anymore. But if they can figure out to get some semblance of motion offense going, they can get him the ball on the move and get him in the right positions and maybe allow him to take a shot within 15 feet so he can actually make it. So I just LeBron, the LeBron dominant system only works when you have another guy that can take over, so LeBron isn't running it the entire time. And sure, he's going to get to that in the playoffs, but right now I just don't see any way that they can really get out of this until Isaiah comes back or they make some sort of significant move.
At what point do we start to get concerned about LeBron playing 37 minutes a night?
Yesterday. He's supposed to be playing about 33 at the most, ideally. So, yeah, it's definitely concerning. Last year everybody felt he played too many minutes, and it's the same thing, and it compounds every single year. So it's
Especially
great that
since he's
going
made
to
the finals 7 years in a row.
Exactly, like his invincibility ends at some point. It's it's always finite. So it's just like with the Spurs. Everyone says, "Oh well, when's the year where they're going to fall off?" Well, at some point they're going to fall off. And unlike the Spurs, LeBron can't he can't do anything to mitigate the aging process. So, I mean, it's the minutes in the regular season should be steadily, very slowly declining, and the fact that we're seeing it pick up is probably the biggest red flag with this team.
So, just to kind of update people, they are winning by 9 against Washington. They've given up 62 first half points, but, they're shooting the lights out in this first half. Like, it's insane. They're at 67% from the field, 64% from 3. And that's still, like, to me, that's great, but it's not shoring up their weakness, I guess. And that's just what worries me long term about them. Like, I agree with you. I think that we're still 3 weeks away from significantly being concerned about the Cavs and needing to blow things up. Having said that, I am starting to wonder if this team is just fatally flawed, especially when their sole goal this year is to beat the Warriors. Like, what personnel on this roster is equipped to defeat the Warriors other than LeBron?
I mean, like, Jay Crowder obviously gives them that dimension that they've been wanting to try to just be able to switch against the Warriors. But, I mean, I think their only hope is, assuming Isaiah comes back and is good again, is for them to try to package as many of these older guys that they have in their rotation to try to get someone useful. And I don't think they're able to do any of that without including that Nets pick there. So I guess really that's their only way to actually try to compete. But I mean, I'm just looking up and down the roster, and there's like 5. Yeah, it looks like there's 5, 6. I could say veteran players who can do like 2 things for them. If they're able to get all those guys to do to succeed in their niche, then sure, they could have the depth. But I just don't like the whole plan that they put in motion this offseason, besides the Kyrie trade, which I think was a tremendous trade, is that every other acquisition that they made was to acquire these like older guys that I guess LeBron felt comfortable with, and that they saw a track record somewhere off in the past that they could do something really effective, which is like the Calderon one just makes absolutely no sense to me. Yeah. I don't think I didn't even include Calderon in that count too. So yeah, it's pretty much everyone there. But like, in this game right now against Washington, I'm not watching as I'm talking to you, but I'm just looking at the box scores, and we're seeing Derrick Rose 7 for 8, LeBron 9 for 13 in 19 minutes in the first half. It's like that's what it takes for them to actually be competitive, is to have all these older guys playing like their younger selves. And they're not going to get that on a consistent basis, which is why I think they need to make some sort of big blow it up move. And for them, it's all basically dictated on what level of percentage do you expect LeBron to stay. Obviously, the Westbrook extension in Oklahoma definitely changes, I think, the parameters for his likelihood to go to like the Lakers, for instance. So that was definitely I'm sure they were celebrating when news came down with Westbrook's extension, but it's still they're in such a massive bind here where their entire decision making during the season could make or break this team, depending on, or the franchise permanently, or at least long term, depending on whether or not LeBron actually stays.
So yeah, Derrick Rose is 7 for 8 for 18 points right now, like you said. It's very typical Derrick Rose though, where he has 1 assist, 2 turnovers, 0 rebounds, 0 steals, 0 blocks. Like, he is a lesser plus minus than the team is winning by. I have not been a fan at all of what I've seen of Rose. Like, his offensive numbers, from a counting perspective at least, don't really look disastrous. Like, he's shooting 51% and averaging 15 points a game. I don't think he's really helping them at all, though. You know what I mean?
No, but
I think he's actually kind of hindering them, even if he is being, personally successful on the floor in a way that maybe was not expected coming into the year.
He's kind of like I mean, for one, he's in a role right now which he isn't supposed to be serving in. He should be like the 8th or 9th man basically. But that being said, he's kind of like a different version of a spot up player. But like his role is mostly to wait for the ball to get swung to him. But then instead of being able to shoot, which is actually effective, he needs to then try to somehow get into the paint and pull off an amazing shot. So I mean his role is just super inefficient, and it's fine when you have it in short spurts, especially if you want to play with the ball in his hands.
Yep.
And at least they have one guy that they can at least run offense through and put the ball in his hands. And while he isn't a good playmaker, they can at least initiate sets with him, or at least just run a pick and roll where he has the option to attack the lane, which pretty much no one else on the roster besides him and LeBron is able to do. Maybe Wade and Jeff Green can do it a little bit, but not really that much. So he at least gives them that, but he's one of the guys that they need to be spotting up, and he's not able to do that. Although, ironically, he is 2 for 2 from 3-point line coming into halftime in this Washington game. And who knows? I mean, it's never too late to become a 3-point shooter. If Jason Kidd can do it, then anybody can do it, right?
You know what they say in 30 Rock? It's never too late for now. But now... This episode is sponsored by Greats, makers of the all-time greats, classic, stylish, and comfortable sneakers sold at a great price. Greats is Brooklyn's first sneaker company. They sell all the greats, classic styles, made the best, for less. There's a wide selection of men's and women's shoes, versatile styles suitable for any occasion, tons of great colors and materials to choose from. Their best sellers include the all-leather Royale lace-up and Wooster slip-on. Jared, do you have greats? Do you use them regularly?
I am currently sitting in my house waiting for my greats. So once I get them, I'm going to be a regular user. I hear they're good, but I'm hoping they're great.
I'm a pretty big fan of them. As I say on this podcast regularly, I have an all-white pair of greats. They really style up my sneaker collection in a way that my girlfriend is pleased about. You can check out those. You can check out a lot of other styles at greats.com. And we've got a great deal for you, our audience. Save 15% on your first order with our offer code GAMETHEORY. That's GAMETHEORY. Go to greats.com. That's GREATS.com. And be sure to enter Game Theory to save 15% at checkout. Greats also believes so much in their shoes. They offer a no-risk return and exchange policy to guarantee that you get the right fit in a style that you love. That's greats.com, and use our code GAMETHEORY to save 15%. Let's get back to the podcast. We're going to go on ahead and move on to the Boston Celtics, because the Celtics are, I would say, in a really interesting spot in general, just from what I've seen from them so far, like a league average offense and the best defense in the NBA, as you mentioned earlier. I was not really expecting that coming into the year, obviously. I don't think that anyone was expecting this defense to actually get better after trading Jay Crowder and Avery Bradley. There are some factors that we'll talk about in a minute here, and you mentioned earlier the opponent 3-point percentage that, kind of say that this might trend down a little bit, but overall, what has been your impression of the Celtics? And, being up close with that team, what has the biggest difference been in terms of the way that they're operating?
Well, they have a good coach, for one, which I'm not sure if people were aware of that, but he's pretty damn good, and he's really proven it here. I mean, it's if you had to pick a coach of the year in the first few weeks of the season, if you're not going to give it to Frank Vogel or Nate McMillan for their team somehow winning all those games, you got to give it to Stevens, because he pulled them out of what could have been one of those events where the team is like, holy crap, this is all for nothing. We're completely screwed with the Hayward injury. And they competed the next night, even though none of them slept, and they were all miserable and they were all devastated. And then they haven't lost since then. And their schedules were relatively easy, but even so, they faced Milwaukee again, and they won that one. They went up against New York, who has been okay so far this year, but most importantly, Al Horford completely destroyed Kristaps Porzingis, completely humiliated him. I had a full film breakdown on CelticsWire.com about how he just completely shut him down.
This is a Kristaps friendly podcast.
But hold on. But this is the point I'm making, is that Kristaps has been like an MVP in every other game.
Yes.
But Al Horford is Al Horford's probably the best, is like the defensive player of the year so far in this unbelievably small sample size. But he has been out of his mind so far. He's playing with a level of intensity that I haven't seen out of him in like the last several years, including back when he was in Atlanta. And a lot of Boston sports fans are renowned for their massholery and their ability to scream as loudly as possible about how someone sucks. And fans, there's a constant argument from fans that because he's not a big scorer, he's an overpaid waste of money. And one of the things that they always point to in their incredibly convoluted arguments is that he doesn't show any aggression and desire to score. And that's like the one area that I thought, if you were ever going to have a criticism for Al Horford, that would probably be it, is that while obviously his game is as a facilitator for the most part, there were a lot of times during the regular season where the team really needed him to at least utilize his post skills or utilize his skills off the bounce to really aggressively take it to the team instead of letting the game play through him, which is what he always insists on in all the interviews. And we saw it in the playoffs last year. When Isaiah was down, Horford started pounding the block. He was going to the low post and hammering people. Mm-hmm. And we're seeing it again so far this year, where after Hayward went down, they started throwing it to him on the block. And in that opening night where they were getting destroyed by Cleveland, in that third quarter comeback, it was mostly on his back, where he was just backing down anybody he could and was just throwing his elbows into them and getting off his hook shot. So he's been doing that throughout the year. He has just been playing with a level of intensity and commitment that, as good as he's been so far, and he had a really good year with Boston and an amazing playoffs with Boston last year, he's playing at a different level right now, and he's just been absolutely elite. And it's taken a lot of pressure off of Kyrie, who's been like slowly figuring it out and now is starting to really take over, and he's really starting to kill it. And then Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, who have kind of taken turns being 20-point scorers, which is kind of remarkable considering how young they are. So pretty much just everything has been working for Boston. There's the system that they put in place during training camp is really good. It's exactly what I've been saying that they were trying to work towards over the last couple of years, and they finally are able to pull it off. And that's why they're so successful right now, is that they have a great system on each end that takes a lot of the tenets of the modern game, is able to pull it off with a very unique compilation of positional length, which is a phrase that I've heard like 50 times over the last week and a half. And they're all actually skilled, and that's the difference from last year's team to this year's team, is that their goal was to put out a 5-man unit where everybody was very skilled on both ends of the floor. Hayward went down, so that kind of hurt it, but they're able to get Smart in there a lot of the time, who is a good two-way player, even though is still a pretty lousy outside shooter. But so that's their idea, is it's all two-way players that are all very good, at least above average, at pretty much all facets of the game.
So yeah, I think that everything that you just said is awesome. And I want to bring up a couple of really big points that I think have helped Boston early in the year. Particularly on the defensive end, this has been an atrocious defensive rebounding team over the last couple of years. Like, especially last year, they were really bad. This year, they're 5th in defensive rebounding rate. That is a massive, massive improvement that I'm interested to see if it holds. What do you think? Do you think that will hold for them?
Oh, man, that's the one that is tricky. I mean, they're going to get Marcus Morris back on Friday. So while he isn't necessarily a good rebounder, he at least will allow them to continue to stay with the lineup schemes that they've been going with while still having at least someone that's powerful enough to affect the boards. Mm-hmm. So far, it's been Tatum who's been really effective on the defensive glass, because he just their rebounding approach is the bigs box out for the wings to fly in, and they were doing it last year. And Avery Bradley was averaging, I think, over 8 rebounds for like the first half of the year, and then they kind of regressed down a little bit. Now they're, instead of having a couple 6'3" guys doing that with him and Smart, now it's Tatum and Jaylen Brown. These are all 6'8" guys basically that are flying in there that are athletic and long. So I think that gives them an advantage over last year. Aaron Baines is so far seems to be noticeably better than Amir Johnson. And Amir Johnson is like one of those stat darlings who's like an RPM darling, just like Jay Crowder is, who when you watch him play, it's kind of hard to notice all the little things that he's doing that makes that happen. But he was a very good positional player, but he definitely struggled on the boards a decent amount because he could get pushed around, and he didn't hold position nearly as well. But Aaron Baines is one of the strongest guys I've ever covered as a journalist, not as a basketball player, and he is incredibly powerful. And it's really shown with his verticality defense, where he's so good at it. He's great with early positioning. He's really good at going straight up and not fouling. And while Amir was good at that as well, people could still drive through him, drive around him. People try to go at Baines, and they like bounce off of him, land on their backs. It's insane. He is an absolute rock. He is all of Australia, as he's now known around here, because of Tommy Heinsohn's little story about running into the shower.
We're aware of Tommy's little statements about Aaron Baines.
I'm not sure how much the rest of the world is aware, but it's all that people ever talk about in Boston.
Tommy, oh boy. The other point of reference I want to bring up about Boston is their opponent three-point percentage and their overall three-point defense. Obviously, I don't think teams are going to shoot 31% against them. That's second best in the NBA. It would be lucky if Boston went the whole year and opponents shot 32% against them from three. I don't think that will hold. But one thing that has held so far that I think holds up on tape whenever you watch them is they do an excellent job of making sure that they get out on shooters and they limit three-point attempts. They're allowing teams to shoot the second fewest three-point attempts in the NBA this year, and I do think that is a testament to their three-point defense. The three-point percentage, I'm a little bit more skeptical on, just because statistically it's been shown that if you allow open threes, teams are going to shoot a certain percentage of them regardless. I am impressed that they're getting out on shooters, though.
Yeah, I mean, like it's the classic advanced noisy stat, right? But it's not noisy if you watch every single possession. You see that they're doing a really good job defending it. So their switching scheme means that they're not zoning off the weak side that often, and they're not getting tangled in ball screen actions that often. So they're able to stay relatively spread out and recover on the three-point shooter. So they don't give up that many wide open shots. The number of wide open shots that they give up, I think, is relatively low compared to the league. And then, so only Miami allows less three-point attempts per game. Miami allows almost 38% shooting, while Boston's is down to 31%. And at home, they only allow 19.8 3-point attempts per game at home, which is astonishingly low. So they played 4 games at home, 4 games on the road just before the OKC game, and they're allowing a lot more 3-point attempts on the road. I think that guys generally tend to hustle a little bit harder on defense at home, so a lot of teams, their defensive numbers are a little bit better at home.
Sure.
But I mean, overall, they're getting into shooters, not allowing wide open shots, which I think is the first way to mute some of the noise on that 3-point percentage allowed stat. And then they have depth in their defensive units where they don't really have much of a drop-off in defensive capability between other units, and they're still in the experimental phase anyway. So I'm not putting a ton of stock into their numbers at this point because they're actually still throwing out all sorts of novel lineups, still trying to pick and choose who fits best together. They have like this little group of 4 guys at the back of the bench who are all youngins: Abdul Nader and Shemi Ojale, and then Yabusele and Tice, who 2 of those guys are older rookies, 2 of those guys are really young rookies. They're all rookies who are all solid role players in this rotation, and they're trying to figure out when they can be used. It seems like Ojale and Tice are at this point earning the actual rotation spot, while Yabusele and Nader are mostly garbage time at this point.
What have you thought of Tice defensively so far? I have not been a fan, given the reputation that he had coming in. Like he was the German Defensive Player of the Year last year in that league. I'm a little bit skeptical.
Yeah, well, it's a bit of a drop-off from the NBA's offensive capabilities in the German league. I would say that So Tice's game was generally just kind of like sprinting back and forth between different spots on the floor in the European ball and then in EuroLeague ball, and he's still playing like that a little bit, but I think he's starting to get a feel for the NBA's how the things work on offenses. Cool. I just think this is all so novel to him, and even more so compared to these other guys that are, for the most part, coming from, like Ojale and Nader were guys that played college ball here. So they're I would say, a little bit more used to how things are done over here as opposed to in the German league, where I'm sure is a lot different. Yeah, so like I think has a steeper learning curve than they do. Although on the other hand, he was playing against all the best European teams, so he's gone up against in the national team. So he's gone up against he played Spain and did a great job against Spain, facing off against the Gasol brothers. So like he's seen a lot of these guys before. I think he's starting to figure it out. It doesn't seem like he's doing that well in pick and roll coverage right now. He's not very powerful in the air, so the verticality stuff isn't quite as effective. But he has had some nice shot blocks and some nice shot contests. Mm-hmm. So like he has that capability. He's a 6'9" guy who's really quick and can leap pretty well and has a good sense of where the ball is. So his high motor, I think, is going to allow him to start to be effective later in the year. Yeah. But they are giving him the minutes. They even gave him the start one night when Aaron Baines wasn't starting. So I think they like what they see out of him, and just he has a steeper learning curve than pretty much anybody on this team right now.
So let's kind of move forward real quick. I have two more topics I want to talk about with the Celtics. Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown have been really, really good, as we kind of mentioned earlier. Jason's rebounding has been great. I would say that Jaylen's really everything has been really good so far, I think. He's had off games occasionally, but on the whole, I've been very impressed with the leap his game has taken overall. Do you think that this can last the whole season? Do you think this is early season, noise, or do you think that as the year progresses, these guys can continue to bring what they have brought?
I mean, like Tatum, you would think that because he's brand new to the league, teams are good. Now that there's like some tape on him, teams are going to start to figure out how they can try to take him out of the game. But frankly, he hasn't really been like the focus of the offensive game plan for Boston. It's mostly he gets his points when they come to him. He's been a good spot up shooter, which is I think the thing that's been really shocking so far. And I think the 3-point numbers at this point, 8 games in, aren't bearing that out as much as they were early on. But if you watch him out there, I mean, he's a good spot up player, and he can attack pretty well off of closeouts. Yep. He's a good enough passer that he can, if he has a wide open shot, he's stepping into it in rhythm and taking it. And if he doesn't have the shot, he's able to dribble out of it and keep the play going, which is going back to what I was saying earlier. That's like the big evolution that their offense is making from last year to this year. And that was kind of the big plan, is to no longer have guys that when they can't get their shot off, then they have to panic and pass out of it and everything resets. They're able to just keep advancing the ball, so they're starting to get to those possessions where they have 10 passes in a play. And that's because of Tatum and Jaylen just being really good off the dribble and being able to take the shot when the ball swings at them, and they have it. So I think the thing that will slow both of them down will be streakiness and shooting, which they're going to encounter throughout the year. But Jaylen is good at getting to the hoop. I mean, Jason is solid at getting to the hoop already, which is pretty impressive for a rookie in this first week or two of his career. Yeah. Jaylen is already like pretty good at getting to the rim for an NBA level. So, he just turned 21. So like I'm projecting him to be a really good all-star caliber finisher at the rim really within the next year or two. He's still learning how to use his left hand, which is something that he's been trying to work on. But with his right hands, he doesn't hit his layups a lot of the time, and he's trying to draw fouls more, and I think he's starting to learn how to draw fouls more, but he's still only averaging, I think, about 4.5 free throws a game. Yep. But with the amount that he drives to the rim, if he's starting to really get his head down and fly into guys, that's going to go up to 6 and then eventually 8 free throws a game, where you're starting to get to like, good starting score caliber there. So once that stuff starts to kick in for him, which could happen this year, it might not happen until next year, that's when he starts to become like a really good starter and a real foundational part for the team. But right now, between Tatum and Brown, it seems almost every night one of those guys is dropping 20. So it takes a lot of the pressure off of Kyrie and Horford.
I do want to say that I think that both of their shooting is going to fall a little bit. Like, I don't think Jason's going to shoot 50% from three. I don't think Jalen's going to shoot 41% from three. But everything else they've shown, I think, is pretty sustainable. It's just going to depend on how defenses react once the shooting comes back down to earth a little bit. I think that they're basically going to play them the same, and I think it's going to allow them to continue to be successful at the rim. And I think that Jason's going to continue to learn in terms of making the right decisions. That's a thing that took him a little bit of time last year at Duke to learn and develop. Took him about half the year. I think that maybe 2/3 of the way through this year, you're going to see him, the game slow down for him a little bit more in a way that I think it's moving pretty quick, despite his early adjustment that's made him as effective as he has been so far. At the end of the day, though, I'm a huge fan of both of these guys, and I think that Boston has nailed both of these picks, and that's really important for their future. The last guy we need to talk about is Mr. Very Much Woke himself, Kyrie Irving. Kyrie, we'll talk about the personal stuff in a minute. You said that it's taken him a little bit of time to kind of get integrated, and I generally agree with that. I think it's just taken him some time to get his personal offensive game going. What has been impressive to me about Kyrie has been he's generally been in the right defensive spots more often than he was in Cleveland. He's getting into passing lanes in a way that, I mean, I don't think he's going to average 2.5 steals a game, but I think he's being a bit more aggressive there. And I think what's allowing him to be more aggressive is something I talked about when this trade happened. I think that having all of the lengthy pieces that Jared has talked about allows him, it kind of insulates him, I guess, a little bit more defensively than where he was in Cleveland. This defensive scheme is built around having those guys who can reduce penetration and having lengthy guys like Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum on the wings, and, you know, occasionally playing him with a guy like, playing him with guys like Terry Rozier, who's long, and Marcus Smart, who's long. Playing him with a guy like Al Horford, who's so smart and so big, and Aaron Baines, who's so good at defending the rim with verticality, I think has been a massive boon to his game defensively. I don't think anyone's going to say he's a plus defender or anything yet, but he hasn't hurt Boston defensively yet, and I think that's important.
I mean, if he's just a non-factor defender, then that gives them the potential to be elite. It's incredible. So, I mean, starting with the steals, just even after the last game on Wednesday, he was asked about that, and he just said, "Oh, they just fell to me," which was kind of true. They kind of just fall to him. So he's had some luck so far, but a big part of it is that he isn't really going over screens that often anymore, and they don't trap high on ball screens very often. So he doesn't, all the things that he really sucked at in Cleveland, he isn't doing that much anymore. It's mostly switching just underneath the 3-point line and just having good communication. And Horford is a great communicator. You can hear him yapping the entire time. You can hear him calling ice with direction when they're icing. And Kyrie's been, for the most part, good enough on being in early position when they're icing that it works and they're able to force the ball to the sideline, which is like, looking at Cleveland, they're terrible at it. They can't force the ball anywhere. Kevin Love gets caught on a swivel underneath the free throw line, and they're completely screwed with dribble penetration. Boston's been really good at preventing that, and they've allowed very little dribble penetration so far.
Cleveland's guards aren't good enough. Whenever someone in an ice situation tries to split the defense and get back toward the middle, Cleveland's guards just aren't aware enough and aren't good enough to stop that from happening.
You know, and the thing is, so with Boston, because they're switching, if the ball handler tries to snake on them and get to the middle of the free throw line, the big usually is Horford, or it will be Morris soon. It's going to be mostly guys that can just, if the guard wants to clear them out and try to take them one-on-one and get a shot off, they can guard that situation. And we've seen Horford, who's one of the probably 3 best in the league at it, with Draymond and, sorry, I'm forgetting who else. Marcus will be up there too. But
Giannis is so long.
Yeah, Giannis is. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Giannis is struggling with help defense, but oh my God, you put him on the ball and that person's screwed. But so, it's just that, like, they're an amorphous blob of defense, and the personnel doesn't seem to matter that much right now because the system is working really well. And teams are going to figure out some ways to take advantage of it at some point. But, right now, they don't have anyone that you can clear out and pick on with a high post up. You don't have anyone that you can beat off the dribble, obviously, and there's no one that you can try to cross up and get into a step back against. They're all good at sticking with their man, and they're all strong enough, and they have good enough communication that they can avoid any of those dangerous clear-out situations. And because they're switching everything, they're staying spread out, and you can't pick on them on the weak side, which is how teams like Cleveland get killed. So right now, Boston doesn't really have any weaknesses in their defense, and I've been watching the tape trying to figure out, what's the thing I would pick on if I'm an opposing team, and I haven't really seen anything yet besides just trying to set really high pick and rolls against Kyrie and see if I can catch him on a switch onto a player that he can't guard and try to attack him. But right now, no one's able to do that. And we'll see, they're going to play Oklahoma, and we'll see if they can do it with Russell and Paul George or Melo and try to get those switches, and maybe that'll work. But
I will point out that, the point guards they have played so far. Milwaukee, Malcolm Brogdon, essentially plays point guard a lot of time for them. They don't really have an explosive point guard who's going to be able to navigate high ball screens against Al Horford like that. The Knicks, same deal. Philadelphia is playing Jared Bayless there, same deal. Goran Dragic can do that with Miami. Sacramento has George Hill and has De'Aaron Fox. De'Aaron's young, he's explosive, but he's still young and figuring it out. DeJounte Murray is still very young. He's good at, kind of navigating that ball screen, but he's not a guy who's going to put a hurting on you like that yet. And then Milwaukee, again, like I said, they've played twice. Cleveland, they lost that game against Cleveland on the opening night. I don't really know that was necessarily the reason they lost, even though that was their second worst defensive performance of the year to this point. They have won 6 in a row, but none of those 6 teams have really been able to put them into a lot of strife defensively with just high middle ball screens. You know what I mean?
Yeah, the only good point guard that they faced so far is Kemba Walker in the preseason. They faced him twice, and they did a solid job. They didn't completely destroy him, but that was in the preseason, and that team wasn't even really figured out yet. So, yeah, that's what I was trying to hint at. Kyrie has not been tested yet.
I would also point out, Goran Dragic is a really good point guard. The Celtics won that game by 6.
He was covering him a lot, though. Yeah, what? I don't think he was covering Goran that much in that game. But I think Goran was having a rough time, and then it killed him at the end of the game, from what I remember.
Just generally what worries me with their defense, though, is the ability to run, those middle high ball screens. You know what I mean? I think that is the way that their defense might be a little bit susceptible, as you said. Dragic did end up 22 points on 9 of 15 shooting. Like you said, it did come a little bit late, don't get me wrong, but, I think that is the worry for me right now. Can they be consistent at limiting penetration on middle ball screens?
Which makes me think at some point they might have to start Marcus Smart, depending on matchup, obviously, just to try to maximize his time out there, because if you can get Smart out there and you can have him pressing at the half-court line, you can push away a lot of those ball screens away from,
for sure,
from the 30-foot mark over the nail, and that might try to force them into side pick and roll, and that's where their bread and butter is defensively.
That's a really great point, too. Last funny statistic I want to point out. Terry Rozier has a defensive rebounding rate over 20 right now. I just love how aggressive Terry Rozier is on the glass. It's awesome.
They're obsessed with Terry. And, I talked to a lot of people working with Terry this offseason, and everyone was like, he's been unbelievable, and he's going to be completely revolutionized. And Celtics Twitter has a great amount of memeitude, as I like to call it. There's just so many great, so many talented people making hilarious memes, videos, stuff like that, GIFs, all that stuff. And one of the best parts has been, it's not even it's not a stretch at all. It's that Terry Rozier's shooting form and all of his physical cadences look exactly like Michael Jordan. And it's uncanny. And whenever he goes into a step back jumper, it's you watch the clip. I tweeted it out the other night, I think. There's a great clip of him. He had this play in I can't remember if it was a San Antonio or Sacramento game. I asked Brad about it, so I think it was a San Antonio game where he was dribbling from left to right at the top of the key, and then he just went into this perfect low crossover. I think he even hit his hand on the ground with the crossover, just really low, and then stepped back into a perfect shot that he nailed. and someone found a clip of MJ doing the exact same shot, and it was like a hologram of MJ was playing for Terry Rozier that night. It was incredible. So point being, he's not quite as good as Michael Jordan. I think he's a little bit worse than Michael Jordan, but he has. I mean, I don't know if that's what they saw in him when they were scouting him and they drafted him, but like he has that beautiful, fluid, athletic game to him that he's starting to be a good enough dribbler that they can actually run scoring plays for him. And it's more than like him just like getting the ball on the elbow and seeing the lane and trying to attack it as hard as he can, where he usually throws himself at the rim and misses half the time. But he's like starting to get comfortable handling the ball. And then, going back to what you were trying to say, he's like a 40-inch vertical. He could jump off of 1 or 2 feet, and he can really fly. And he has that motor where just he sees the ball go up, and he's either sprinting down the court or he's going to try to catch the ball before it even hits the rim. Like, he is just obsessed with it. And they love him so much because he just plays with this relentless energy. And, last year and the very little that he played in his rookie year, it was like a lot of energy that was just overspent on trying to be energetic. And now he's starting to be smart enough that he's able to use it at the right times. He's getting better court awareness, and he's starting to be a really productive player for them. So there's going to be a debate at some point this year about whether you keep Marcus Smart and play that luxury tax if Terry Rozier is really pushing it. Because unlike Marcus, while Marcus is a really good point guard, and I think his point guard skills have gotten, like, he could be one of the best point guards still coming off the bench in the NBA as far as a quarterbacking perspective, but he still is extremely streaky from the outside, while Terry has shown that he's going to have a pull-up game from pretty much everywhere on the floor in a year or two, and he's going to be pretty deadly if he's able to pull that off.
Yeah, I mean, I generally like Terry. It was funny, I remember in the draft process, like, kind of talking to a couple people around the Celtics, and it was one of those things where you could tell that Boston really, really liked him. I think that I did end up mocking him to Boston just because I knew that, and I had him at 27. They ended up taking him at 16. I guess I didn't realize like how much they liked him at the time, and I talked to someone in their front office after, and they were just like, yeah, so we talked about Terry, sometime in April. 2 weeks after we talked, I knew we were taking Terry because I knew how much Danny loved Terry. And, I think that it's very easy to see why Danny Ainge would love someone like Terry Rozier and would think that it would have a higher valuation on him than the rest of the NBA, which it seems like is, true given all of the meme-itude, as you said, about Terry out there.
Oh, but he has so much Danny Ainge in him. I mean, I'm just waiting.
He absolutely does.
I'm waiting for him to start punching guys in the stomach and stuff like that. I mean, he looks like a young Danny Ainge running around out there. So if he can develop that shot, then he'll be really good. But I think Danny, that's what Danny loves about guys like Marcus and Terry, is they remind him of himself when he was younger. He was that scrappy, hard-nosed defensive player who was ready to fight anybody at any moment and try to fight anybody at any moment as well.
Let's talk about Washington real quick. Washington is in a really funky spot. They're going to be 4-3 entering this game against Cleveland. Game is not going like crazy well for them. They're down 7 at this stage with 7 minutes left in the third quarter. What have you seen of Washington so far? To me, it seems like just a lot of the same issues they have had in the past. Their bench is a disaster. Like nothing they have done to fix that bench has worked. And their starters are really ridiculously good. Like, Otto Porter continues to get better. Like, I think he's not as good as Bradley Beal, but he's closing in on being as valuable to them as Bradley Beal, I think. Like, he has been remarkable on both ends of the floor this year, just due to his defensive versatility, his length. Obviously, his efficiency has been just off the charts good, and no one's going to shoot 51% from 3 the entire year. Like, that's just not going to happen. But he's just been ridiculously good this year in a way that is significant for them whenever they hit the playoffs. Kelly Oubre, I think, as I've talked about on this podcast before, has been really good this year. I've liked what I've seen from him. Marcin Gortat is still doing Marcin Gortat things. We'll see how Markieff Morris kind of enters this mix. He might help their bench a little bit and give them a little bit more depth because of what we've seen from Kelly Oubre so far. I will say that even though the bench has not been great, I have liked a little bit of what I've seen from Mike Scott. Like, I think he's been relatively valuable for them, at least as a stopgap power forward off the bench. What has your overall impression of Washington been, though?
I mean, you kind of nailed it there. It's like they're a starter-heavy team, and their starting lineup is great. I'm really high on Oubre. I really liked what I saw out of him last year, and it was weird. I heard there's a lot of weird noise about people thinking he was going to suck last year, or thinking he was going to have a lousy career after watching him his rookie year, which I never understood. He's been great, and maybe it's because he has the most beautiful eyes in the NBA. I don't know what it is that people have a problem with him, but he's been really good for them so far, and I think he's showing more offensive capability early on than people were expecting. And that was, I remember that was a pick where I think I was there. I was in DC at the Verizon Center the night that he got drafted. And all the reporters were kind of just looking at Ernie Grunfeld like, what is this pick? Why did you take him? You just took Otto Porter. You're Bradley Beal. Why?
Well, that was really dumb of them. I will say that. Like, Kelly was considered like a universal lottery pick, and they got him at 15 in a trade for – who the hell did they trade for that pick? Like, it was comical.
Oh, God, I can't remember. Yeah. It was, you know what? They were like a few other teams. They were ahead of the game where they knew that you want to have as many wings as possible. And they are in a good position for the future having him there because he's going to be starting for them at some point soon, maybe even this year eventually, probably next year. But he's just going to be too good that they're going to want to maximize his minutes.
The Wizards were a part of the Tim Hardaway trade to Atlanta with the Knicks. They essentially just gave up their first and 2 future seconds for Kelly Oubre. Like that was a smart pick, I think.
Yeah, it looks like it's working out pretty damn well. So yeah, between him and Porter, it's like they're set, and then of course Wall and Beal. So yeah, I mean Porter, I agree with your assessment of the fact that he's almost as good as Bradley Beal, and I think Bradley Beal's pretty awesome. So
yeah, like I think Bradley Beal is going to be an all-star this year. Like that, I'm not denigrating Bradley Beal. Like I mean it to say that Otto is awesome.
I think they'll probably have 3 All-Stars by next year when Porter makes his All-Star team. He's I love everything about his game, and if he's the kind of guy that he probably can become like an elite lights out shooter, which I know obviously last year he was a really good 3-point percentage shooter, but he could be like a full on sniper. And even if he's not amazing off the dribble, he'll be good enough off the dribble that he'll still be an extremely valuable offensive player. And then defensively, he can probably end up doing just about everything on the floor. So, I mean, I like them. And if Cleveland doesn't make a move, or Isaiah Thomas doesn't come back as the guy that he was last year, which no one's really expecting, I'm starting to think that Washington probably will end up with the 1 seed, or at least fight Toronto for the 1 seed this year.
Yeah, that was something I kind of talked about in the preseason, and I don't want to say I got laughed at, but Boston fans thought their team was going to be really good. Cleveland fans obviously have every right to think their team was going to be good coming into the year. And I said, I kind of think Washington is going to end up with the 1 seed just because of that. I don't know how I feel about that now. I do think that their depth is a little bit worse than what I anticipated. Like, maybe Morris will help there, but I expected Tim Frazier to help in a way that he hasn't really yet. I expected Jody Meeks to give them a modicum of offense that he hasn't helped with at all yet. I kind of expected Jan Mahinmi as well to play a little bit bigger of a role, hopefully being healthier than what he's shown so far this year. Just simply put, he hasn't been able to reduce the minute output on Marcin Gortat enough to where I feel comfortable with him. I just wish that I liked their bench pieces a little bit more, given how strong their starters are. And, it's impossible to use on-off numbers with Washington because that starting lineup is so good that it warps all of the rest of the team's numbers. But, I do think it is telling that this team just falls off a cliff when the starters leave.
And Scott Brooks doesn't really stagger between Beal and Wall, and that's the one thing that I never really understood. I feel like that would fix so many of your problems. But
he's done it a little bit more this year, I will say. I do feel like he's played John Wall with the second unit just a little bit more.
Which is okay, good, because I've only watched 2 games of theirs so far, and I've just been kind of reading up and studying the numbers on them and catching as much as I can of them. But I haven't seen much of Wall with the second unit, but that's good because that's what they need. Frankly, they're starting, if they just replace Wall with Oubre out there and have the ball kind of running through Beal a lot of the time and have Tim Frazier with them, they could probably still be really good, and that allows them to stagger walls. So that's great. And I do like the fact that they at least got Tim Frazier as their backup point guard instead of Brandon Jennings, because Jennings was kind of a disaster last season for them. And I've always liked Frazier. He's always been a solid overachiever, and I like that they're at least going for this identity of having a team full of hard-nosed guys or overachiever guys, which is the kind of balance that you need to have if they're going to make up for the fact that their bench is lacking in talent compared to most of the guys they're competing against.
I guess we should talk about Toronto real quick. Toronto is utilizing a bit more of like a ball movement offense. They're allowing DeMar DeRozan to create for his teammates a little bit more. I like that move. I'm glad that DeMar has kind of bought into that, it seems like. The defense has been really good in a way that I don't know is going to necessarily hold up. But, Toronto is a team that I feel pretty good about winning right around 50 games and potentially being the 1 seed again, as you mentioned.
Yeah, I'm really curious to see how much it hold up of DeRozan being a real playmaker, because that's been definitely a surprise. I like the fact that they're using more Norm Powell, and that's, I think, the thing that all of us on Norm Powell Island have been waiting for, and he's finally getting significant run. And I mean, they're when they run their lineup where it's Ibaka with Siakam, they have a +6 differential. Compared to with Valanciunas, it's a -4 differential. So, which definitely indicates to me that I think Valanciunas is probably on his way out. Ironic, since last year, Masai, there's that video clip of him saying, "Oh, we would never trade you for Andre Drummond," and I wouldn't be shocked if they end up trading him for Andre Drummond this year. So, we'll see what happens. But I think them moving away from relying on Valanciunas and opening things up a little bit more for guys like Powell and DeRozan to get consistent dribble penetration is definitely helping. So, they're still incredibly talented and they have a lot of depth, and that's the one advantage that they have over Washington at the very least, and probably even Cleveland. So,
I think it's very telling that Jonas Valanciunas is the only player on Toronto with a negative net rating right now, and it's -4.8. It is over 59 minutes because he missed some time over the course of the early part of the year. But, he has just not been very good so far. I think that we can just say that. He has not been a fit within their scheme so far.
Yeah, I mean, I'd rather be giving that time to Siakam and Nogueira and some Pirtle when they're able to use them. So
I've liked what I've seen from Pirtle this year too, and maybe playing some smaller lineups with Ibaka at the 5 with OG Anunoby at the 4. Anunoby has given them pretty strong minutes this year as well.
And that's the thing that is really exciting. Is just the fact that they're getting anything out of OG right now is amazing. I loved him in college. I'm sure you loved him in college, I'd imagine. I will say this, I was a little bit more skeptical of his offensive game than what a lot of people were. I've been a little bit more impressed with that so far than what I was at Indiana, but his defense is impeccable. You cannot complain about that at all. I mean, that draft pick could change the course of that franchise, frankly, that they were able to gamble on a guy that should have been a clear top 10 talent if he didn't have the injury issues. And the fact that not only is he available to start the year, which is a shock, but that he's a good rotation player already is just unbelievable.
And you know what the crazy part about all of this is with Toronto? They're doing this with a Kyle Lowry that's averaging 13 points while shooting 37% from the field. Unless you think Kyle is just, kind of worn down and the wear and tear is catching up, you'd have to think that he's going to bounce, probably positively in terms of regression at some point.
Yeah, I mean, he's only taking 12 shots a game right now, so that is way down. I mean, Serge is taking a lot of shots, and he's taking almost as many threes as Lowry, which is kind of remarkable. As is CJ Miles, who we haven't even included yet in this discussion.
Great.
Yeah, they're just super deep. It's they go 11 deep of good rotation players, which is incredible. They're probably, I assume they have the best depth in the Eastern Conference at the very least right now, right?
I would think so. Siakam giving them anything offensively has been a major surprise to me. He's averaging 9 to 10 points a game right now, doing it on really, really efficient shooting. I don't know if that's going to hold up, but like he's doing it while shooting like 2 threes a game too. Like whenever I did the scouting report on him, you know, I did mention that I thought the mechanics were there to improve the jump shooter, but I never thought it would come along this quickly. Like the fact that he has been even useful offensively, like he's averaging nearly 20 points per 36 minutes. Like that's not going to hold, but I think it shows more growth offensively than what I could have possibly anticipated coming into the year.
I mean, I just like that they're 4th in the league right now in 3-point attempts. So they're clearly making progress on that front of trying to have a more efficient distribution. And then they're 6th in the league in differential. They have a 6.4 net rating. So, you know, they're 4-3 record is meaningless, right? It's look at their net rating for a better indicator of performance. They are offensively actually kind of efficient, which is probably the first time you would say this during the Masai era. So,
I mean they've always been efficient numerically, but like it just hasn't looked pretty. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like I think they've had a top 5 offense the last 2 years, but it just hasn't necessarily looked great because so much of it is okay. We're going to clear out for DeMar, who's going to make a tough shot. It's not aesthetically pleasing. This year, it's aesthetically pleasing and statistically, very, very strong right now.
And I would say aesthetically pleasing is probably more important than anything because it's not even about like, oh, is it pretty ball movement, but just that they are able to rely on multiple players to function in multiple ways instead of everything revolving around Kyle runs the offense and then we try to get some amazing shots for DeMar. That's never really worked for anybody ever except for Kobe, I guess, and MJ. So DeMar certainly fancies himself to be that kind of player, but I don't think anybody else really does. But if they're able to figure out a way to use DeMar in an efficient and egalitarian manner, that allows them to actually take another step when most people thought they were probably going to plateau. Although, of course, the fact that they've made some good moves and they've drafted really well obviously allows them to continue to at least try to push forward.
Yeah, I mean, just one last kind of note here. They're 4th in turnover percentage right now in the NBA offensively. Just limiting turnovers is so important for teams that, you know, may not necessarily have the most offensive talent in the world, but, you know, find a way to get by.
Yeah, and you know what? I just have the completely non sequitur, and it's just something that I just saw was a quote from Kyrie, just going back to what we were saying before, that he said that he's been what he's been satisfied with in Boston is that he has been craving an intellectually capacitive coach to match his intellectual capability his entire career, and he finally has it at Brad Stevens. And ESPN managed to do a split screen of him and Ty Lue while they were showing that quote, which I thought was pretty incredible. But
Kyrie is he's amazing right now.
It's amazing. It's amazing. He actually on Wednesday he almost yelled at me during a press conference and then was like, "Oh, I'm not yelling at you," but it was really fascinating. But I asked him a question about kind of referring to Josh Jackson with the Celtics. He had said something about how Tatum has grown so much in an environment where you wouldn't expect a rookie to thrive. And so then I asked him, some rookies try to avoid winning situations towards the top of the draft because they want to be able to feature themselves. What do you think of that? And he was like, nobody should want to do that. And then he was like, whoa, I'm not yelling at you. I know it's not you. And then went on this whole thing about that, about how, no one should want to be putting themselves in a situation where they're not competing at any point of their career, and that your personal agenda should always be second to the agenda of trying to win. And it was just fascinating to see him feeling completely unleashed at this point, which is one of the interesting plot lines of the Celtics. Is he feels intellectually unleashed, and he feels like he can basically say whatever he wants to say now and kind of pass judgment on the entire league now that he's in this position of power with Boston that he wasn't in before. Although he's been super respectful and equitable with all of his teammates, and he was also asked in the same press conference, kind of been asked this a few times, the kind of the flip side of the LeBron James as a father figure question that he got last year. He's been kind of asked the flip side of that. He was asked about, like, what has he seen out of Jalen? What impact has he had on Jalen? And he was like, well, no. Jalen is his own man, has accomplished everything on his own. So he's been very steadfast on that. But then he'll also, opine about how there's no real images of the Earth and stuff like that. So it's been absolutely fascinating. So sorry for that non sequitur, but I saw that and I had to make sure that was in the conversation.
I just want someone to ask him about, like, all of the random conspiracy theories people have. Like, I want people to ask him, like, do you think JFK was like assassinated by Lee Harvey Oswald? Do you think that, like, 9/11 was an inside job? Like, I just want to know Kyrie's thoughts on every single, like, potential conspiracy theory.
I mean, I just want to know if he's read the JFK files that came out last week. I'm sure he's read every single page of it.
It'd be really funny, just, like, imagining Kyrie sitting down reading, like, the JFK files and, like, diving into, like, why he thinks, like, this was an inside job.
Kyrie can list off every single assassination plot against Castro and everything like that.
Jared, tell the people where they can find your work again.
You can find me at Real Donald. No, I'm just kidding. It's at Jared Weiss NBA, and you can find me on CelticsWire.com as part of the USA Today Sports Media Group, and you can find me sliding in the DMs with Sam Facini as well.
Jared, thank you for coming on, man. This has been the Game Theory Podcast. Please remember to rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Android, whatever podcasting app you use. Please remember to subscribe to The Athletic. Please keep me employed. That is also a very nice thing that you can do for me. We'll be back next week. We'll talk some prospects with Cole Zwicker. We'll talk some more NBA stuff. I don't even know how to attack the Kyrie stuff anymore. It's just hilarious to me. Jared, I'm going to see Thor. I will talk to you soon, man. Bye-bye.